June 6, 1944, 1 a.m. American paratroopers are jumping into darkness over Normandy. They're supposed to land in organized drop zones, seize key bridges and crossroads, then link up with the beach invasion at dawn. That's the plan. But the plan is already falling apart. Private John Steele lands on the church steeple in Sainte-Mère-Église, his parachute caught on the spire. He's dangling 40 feet above the town square, watching Germans shoot his friends as they land. He's supposed to be 3 miles away. Miles away, other paratroopers are landing in flooded marshes, in enemy camps, scattered across 50 square miles of countryside. It's a disaster. Commanders are screaming into radios, "Where is everyone? Why aren't you at the rally points?" But here's the incredible thing. This disaster just saved D-Day. The scattered drop confuses the Germans so badly they can't figure out what's happening. Is it the main invasion? Is it a diversion? Where is the real attack coming from? By the time they figure it out, it's too late. Sometimes the biggest mistakes create the greatest victories. Let's understand what was supposed to happen. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, has been planned for 2 years. It's the most complex military operation ever attempted. 156,000 men will land on 5 beaches, but before the beach landings, airborne forces must secure the flanks. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions will drop behind Utah Beach. Their mission: capture key bridges, destroy German communications, block reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Everything depends on precise execution. The paratroopers must land in designated drop zones, rally quickly, and seize their objectives before the Germans can react. The planning is meticulous. Every unit has specific drop zones marked on maps, rally points are designated, objectives are assigned, timing is calculated to the minute. The paratroopers will jump at 100 hours, giving them 5 hours of darkness to organize before the beach assault begins at 6:30. Let's meet these soldiers. The 82nd Airborne, the All-Americans, the 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles. These are elite troops, volunteers who've trained for months. They've practiced parachute jumps, night operations, small unit tactics. They're ready for anything. Or so they think. Most of these men have never been in combat before. Some are teenagers. They've trained in England, jumping from planes over peaceful countryside. Now they're about to jump into occupied France, at night, under fire, into the biggest battle in history. The reality of what they're about to do is starting to sink in. They load onto C-47 transport planes in the evening of June 5th. Each man carries over 100 pounds of equipment. Weapons, ammunition, rations, grenades, a reserve parachute, a main parachute. They're so heavily loaded they need help climbing into the planes. Inside the aircraft, they sit on metal benches, shoulder to shoulder, trying not to think about what's coming. The flight across the English Channel is rough. The weather is marginal. General Eisenhower almost postponed the invasion because of it. Storms are moving through, clouds are low, visibility is poor, but the weather forecast shows a brief window of improvement. It's now or never. The invasion launches. The C-47s fly in formation, 9 planes per serial, multiple serials in a long stream. They cross the channel at 500 feet to avoid German radar. As they approach the French coast, they climb to 1,500 feet, the jump altitude. This is when things start going wrong. German anti-aircraft guns open fire. Tracer rounds streak through the sky. Explosions rock the aircraft. Some planes are hit, engines smoking, struggling to stay airborne. Pilots break formation to evade the fire. The careful organization that was supposed to deliver each unit to its exact drop zone disintegrates. Then they hit the clouds. Thick, dense clouds that weren't supposed to be there. Visibility drops to 0. Pilots lose sight of the lead aircraft. Navigation becomes impossible. They're flying on instruments, in the dark, taking anti-aircraft fire, trying to find drop zones they can't see. Some pilots panic and accelerate, trying to get through the danger zone faster. Others slow down, trying to navigate carefully. The formations that were supposed to stay together spread out across miles of sky. Planes that were supposed to arrive over drop zones simultaneously arrive minutes apart or don't arrive at the right location at all. The pathfinders, paratroopers who jumped earlier to mark drop zones with lights and radar beacons, are scattered just as badly. Some of their equipment is damaged in the jump. Some pathfinders land in the wrong locations. The neat pattern of lighted drop zones that was supposed to guide the main force simply doesn't exist. The red light comes on in each C-47. The jumpmaster yells, "Stand up! Hook up!" The paratroopers struggle to their feet, burdened by their heavy equipment. They hook their static lines to the cable running down the center of the plane. The static line will automatically open their parachutes when they jump. The green light flashes on. Go, go, go! Men shuffle to the door and throw themselves into the darkness. The prop blast from the engines hits them like a physical blow. They tumble in the air for a second, then their parachutes snap open. They're floating down into France, into combat, into chaos. But they're not where they're supposed to be. Some planes dropped their sticks of paratroopers 3 miles from the correct location. Some dropped them 10 miles away. Some dropped them directly over German positions. Some dropped them over flooded areas where the Germans deliberately broke the dikes to create obstacles. Private Robert Murphy lands in a flooded marsh. The water is chest deep. His equipment weighs him down. He nearly drowns before he can cut away his parachute. He struggles through the water, finally reaches dry ground, and has absolutely no idea where he is. He was supposed to land in a field near a specific church. He's in a swamp. He can hear gunfire in multiple directions. He's completely lost. Across 50 square miles of Normandy, 13,000 American paratroopers are landing in the wrong places. Small groups of men huddle in hedgerows, trying to figure out where they are. Officers can't find their units. Radios are lost or broken. The carefully rehearsed plan has evaporated. At drop zone headquarters, the few officers who landed in the right place are desperate. Colonel Robert Sink, commanding the 506th Regiment of the 101st Airborne, lands near his designated drop zone. He immediately starts trying to organize. He sends out patrols to find scattered troopers. He sets up a rally point, but only a fraction of his regiment shows up. Where is everyone? He doesn't know that most of his men are scattered across the countryside, lost, disorganized, but still fighting. Small groups are stumbling onto German positions and attacking. Other groups are defending themselves against Germans who are just as confused. The battle is becoming a free-for-all with no front lines, no organization, just chaos. The American commanders are starting to panic. The airborne operation, which was supposed to secure the flanks of the invasion, has turned into a disaster. Units can't find each other. Objectives aren't being taken. Communications are broken. On paper, this looks like a catastrophic failure. But 200 miles away, in German headquarters, confusion is even worse. And that confusion is about to paralyze their response to the entire invasion. Let's switch sides and understand what the Germans are seeing. The German 7th Army is responsible for defending Normandy. They've been expecting an invasion, but they don't know where or when. Their intelligence suggests the main invasion will come at Pas-de-Calais, further north. Normandy is considered a secondary sector. The German defenses in Normandy are spread thin. They have some good units, like the 91st Airborne Division, but also many second-rate units with older soldiers and conscripts from occupied countries. They're not expecting a major attack here. They're especially not expecting an airborne assault. At approximately 0100 hours, June 6th, reports start flooding into German headquarters. Paratroopers are landing, but the reports are contradictory and confusing. Paratroopers landing near Sainte-Mère-Église. Also reports of paratroopers 20 miles away near Carentan. More reports of paratroopers inland near Saint-Lô. Reports of paratroopers everywhere. German intelligence officers stare at the map in confusion. The reports show paratroopers scattered over a huge area. This doesn't make sense. If it's a real invasion, why are they so spread out? Airborne assaults should be concentrated on key objectives. This pattern looks random, almost like a diversion. Major Friedrich Hayne, the intelligence officer at the 84th Corps, later wrote, "The reports kept coming in. Paratroopers here, paratroopers there, paratroopers everywhere. We couldn't identify any pattern. Were they all part of one operation? Were there multiple operations? Was this the real invasion or a feint to draw our reserves away from Pas-de-Calais? Making this worse, the Germans are receiving false reports mixed with real ones. The Allies dropped dummy paratroopers in some areas, mannequins with firecrackers attached to simulate gunfire. These dummies are landing in locations far from both the real drop zones and the scattered actual paratroopers. German units are reporting enemy activity that doesn't even exist. Some German units report being attacked by large airborne forces. Other units report seeing paratroopers but not being engaged. The picture makes no sense. A normal airborne operation would concentrate forces on specific objectives. Bridges, crossroads, communication centers. This operation seems to have no focus at all. The scattered drop creates exactly the kind of confusion that paralyzes military decision-making. The German commanders face several possibilities. 1. This is a diversion. The real invasion is coming somewhere else. They should hold their reserves and not commit them to fighting scattered paratroopers. 2. This is the real invasion, but it's going badly for the Allies. Their airborne drop failed. Their troops are scattered and disorganized. The Germans should counterattack aggressively and destroy them before they can organize. 3. This is the real invasion, and the scattering is intentional. The Americans are using some new tactic the Germans don't understand. They should defend everything and wait to see what develops. Each option requires completely different responses, and nobody knows which is correct. So they do the worst possible thing. They do nothing. They wait for better intelligence. They ask for clarification. They hold their reserves in place. Precious hours slip away while German commanders argue about what's happening. One German unit that does respond is the 91st Air Landing Division. Ironically, they're the German airborne troops, but they're being used as ground infantry. They're stationed near the American drop zones, and they immediately start hunting scattered paratroopers. But even their response backfires. The 91st Division spreads out to chase small groups of Americans. They're fighting dozens of small engagements across the countryside. They're winning most of these fights. They're killing or capturing scattered American paratroopers. But they're not concentrating their forces on the key objectives. They're reacting to the chaos instead of imposing order on it. By dawn, the 91st Division has fought all night and has nothing to show for it. They've disrupted the American airborne assault, but they haven't stopped it. And more importantly, they haven't positioned themselves to stop the beach landings that are now beginning. Making everything worse, the American paratroopers are cutting German communications lines. One of their objectives is to destroy telephone cables and disrupt radio communications. Small groups of lost American paratroopers, stumbling through the countryside, find German communication lines and cut them. They don't even realize how important this is. They're just following their training. Destroy enemy infrastructure. The result is that German units can't coordinate with each other. Reports aren't getting through to higher headquarters. Orders aren't getting back to frontline units. Each German unit is fighting in isolation, making decisions based on incomplete information. General Erich Marx, commanding the 84th Corps, tries to get a clear picture of what's happening. He sends out liaison officers to visit frontline units and report back. But traveling at night through an area full of American paratroopers is dangerous. Some liaison officers don't make it back. The ones who do return have contradictory information. There's another factor working against the Germans. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding German forces in France, is not in Normandy. He's in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday. He left because the weather was bad, and he believed an invasion was unlikely in these conditions. He's not expected back until June 6th afternoon. In Rommel's absence, there's no clear commander with authority to commit the panzer reserves. The panzer divisions are under direct control of Hitler's high command in Germany. Local commanders can't commit them without approval from Hitler himself. And Hitler is asleep. Nobody wants to wake him up with uncertain information about a possible invasion that might be a diversion. So the panzers sit in their assembly areas, engines cold, while German infantry units fight scattered engagements with American paratroopers. The units that could crush the airborne forces and then move to the beaches remain uncommitted because of a command structure that requires approval from hundreds of miles away. It's now 0300 hours, 3 a.m. The American paratroopers have been on the ground for 2 hours. They're scattered, disorganized, and confused. But somehow, some of them are accomplishing their missions anyway. Small groups of lost soldiers are stumbling onto their actual objectives by accident, and their determined improvisation is about to turn chaos into victory. Let's follow one group of paratroopers and see how this chaos creates success. The Lafayette Bridge across the Meurthe River is a critical objective. If the Germans can use this bridge, they can rush reinforcements to the beaches. If the Americans can hold it, they can block German movement. The plan called for a full company of paratroopers to drop near the bridge, seize it immediately, and establish strong defenses. That's not what happens. The company drops scattered across several miles. Most land in flooded areas and struggle just to survive. But a few small groups land close enough to the bridge to reach it. Lieutenant John Dolan lands with 4 men from his platoon. He has no idea where the rest of his unit is. He knows generally where he is because he recognizes landmarks from aerial photos. He realizes he's close to Lafayette Bridge. He also realizes that if he's close, Germans might be too. He decides to head for the bridge with his tiny group. Dolan's 5-man team reaches the bridge just as a German unit arrives from the other direction. A firefight erupts. 5 Americans against approximately 30 Germans. The Americans have the advantage of surprise and better positions in the hedgerows. They pour fire into the German column. The Germans, confused in the darkness, can't tell how many Americans there are. They take cover and return fire cautiously. Dolan realizes he can't hold the bridge with 5 men, but he can make the Germans think there are more Americans. He spreads his men out. He has them fire from different positions, then move and fire from new positions. He makes noise, yells orders to non-existent squads. The Germans hear Americans to their left, their right, their front. They must be facing a strong force. The German commander makes a fatal decision. He pulls back to reassess the situation. He'll wait for dawn and more troops before attacking. Dolan's bluff works. The Germans withdraw. 5 Americans have seized and are holding a critical bridge through sheer audacity. Over the next hour, more scattered American paratroopers stumble onto the bridge. They hear the gunfire and move toward it. By dawn, Dolan has about 30 men, holding the Lafayette Bridge. It's still not the full company he was supposed to have, but it's enough to hold against probing attacks. The Germans, convinced they're facing a strong force, don't attack in strength. Remember Private John Steele, hanging from the church steeple? His story is part of the larger chaos in Sainte-Mère-Église. The town is a key crossroads. Holding it will prevent German movement along several critical routes. The plan called for the 505th Regiment to drop near the town, seize it, and defend against German counterattacks. The drop is catastrophic. Paratroopers land scattered across several miles. Some land directly in the town, where Germans are fighting a fire in a building. Germans shoot paratroopers as they float down. It's a slaughter. Bodies hang from trees and buildings. John Steele plays dead hanging from the church, watching Germans shoot his friends. But enough paratroopers land outside the town to organize. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss gathers about 200 men, less than a third of his battalion. But 200 is enough. They attack Sainte-Mère-Église from multiple directions. The Germans, again confused about how many Americans there are, fall back. By 0430 hours, Krauss has seized the town. He immediately organizes defenses. He doesn't have heavy weapons, anti-tank guns, or artillery, but he has determined men in good positions. When German counterattacks come later in the day, the Americans hold. Just barely, but they hold. Another objective is a German power plant and communication center. This is supposed to be seized by a full platoon. Instead, 6 paratroopers stumble onto it. Sergeant Charles de Glopper and 5 others land near the facility entirely by accident. They're lost. They don't even realize they're at a key objective. They just see a German installation and decide to attack it. 6 men assault a fortified position. It should be suicide. But they have surprise. They're aggressive, and the German defenders are not expecting an attack. De Glopper and his team rush the building, throwing grenades, firing submachine guns. The Germans, thinking they're being attacked by a larger force, abandon the position. De Glopper's team holds the power plant for 3 hours before more Americans arrive. During that time, they fend off 2 German counterattacks. De Glopper himself is killed, providing covering fire so his men can retreat to better positions. He receives the Medal of Honor posthumously. His action, entirely unplanned and accidental, disrupts German communications for the critical hours of the invasion. Across the airborne landing area, this pattern repeats. Small groups of lost paratroopers accidentally find objectives and attack them. Larger groups that were supposed to take objectives can't because they're too scattered. But the small groups succeed through audacity and surprise. The Germans see Americans attacking everywhere. They can't tell which. Attacks are serious, and which are just small, harassing forces. So they defend everything. They spread their forces thin, trying to counter attacks from all directions. This is exactly what the airborne operation was supposed to achieve, but nobody planned it this way. By dawn, when the beach landings begin, the German defenders are exhausted, confused, and spread thin. They've been fighting scattered engagements all night. They don't know where the main American force is. They don't know if the airborne assault is even connected to the beach landings, or if it's a separate operation. The command structure is paralyzed by confusion and communication breakdowns. One of the most remarkable aspects of the scattered drop is how junior officers and even enlisted men step up to lead. Colonels and majors land miles from their units, so sergeants take command. Privates lead fire teams. The rank structure breaks down, but leadership emerges anyway. Brigadier General Maxwell Taylor, Assistant Division Commander of the 101st Airborne, lands far from his drop zone. He spends the night gathering scattered troopers. By dawn, he has about 50 men. He doesn't waste time looking for his division staff or trying to re-establish the command structure. He just takes his 50 men and attacks the nearest German position. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole does the same. His battalion is scattered. Most of his officers are missing. He gathers whoever he can find and moves toward his objective. He doesn't have the force he was supposed to have, but he improvises tactics to compensate. Instead of a set-piece assault, he uses infiltration and surprise. This improvised leadership is possible because of the extensive training the paratroopers received. Every man was taught to think independently, to understand the mission, to take initiative. When the original plan falls apart, they don't wait for orders. They assess the situation and act. It's now 6:30 hours. The sun is rising. The beach assault is beginning. The German commanders finally have enough daylight to see what they're facing on the beaches. But the airborne assault behind their lines is still creating chaos, and the scattered paratroopers are about to prove that being in the wrong place at the right time can be better than being in the right place at the wrong time. The troops landing on Utah Beach at 6:30 are supposed to link up with the airborne forces within hours. That's the plan. But the airborne forces are scattered, and the beach forces are fighting their own battles. The link-up doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen according to plan. But when it does happen, it's decisive. Troops from the 4th Infantry Division, moving inland from Utah Beach, encounter scattered groups of paratroopers throughout the morning. These encounters are chaotic. Neither side is entirely sure who they're meeting. Challenge and password exchanges happen frantically. But gradually, beach forces and airborne forces merge into a coherent front. The paratroopers have been fighting all night without heavy weapons, without resupply, often without food or water. They're exhausted. But the arrival of beach forces brings tanks, artillery, ammunition, and fresh troops. The combined force is vastly more capable than either alone. By midday, June 6th, the German High Command finally commits panzer reserves to counterattack. The 12th SS Panzer Division and the Panzer Lehr Division are ordered to move toward the beaches and drive the Allies into the sea. But they're attacking 12 hours late, and they have to move through an area infested with scattered American paratroopers. The Panzer's movement is constantly disrupted. American paratroopers hiding in hedgerows, ambush supply trucks. They cut roads with felled trees and mines. They attack communication lines. The panzers move slowly, having to clear the route as they advance. What should be a 3-hour movement takes all day. When the panzers finally arrive near the beaches, they find not disorganized invasion forces, but established beachheads with armor and artillery support. The moment for a decisive counterattack has passed. They fight hard, they inflict casualties, but they can't push the Allies back into the sea. The invasion is succeeding. The cost of the scattered drop was high. Of the 13,000 American paratroopers who jumped into Normandy on the night of June 5th into 6th, approximately 2,500 were killed, wounded, or captured in the first 24 hours. That's a casualty rate of nearly 20%. Many of these casualties were men who drowned in flooded areas, landed on German positions, or were isolated and captured. The scattered drop that confused the Germans also isolated many American soldiers, making them vulnerable. Some units lost 70% of their strength in the first day. But compare this to what was expected. Allied planners thought airborne operations might have 50% casualties. They considered it acceptable to lose half the force if it meant securing the flanks of the invasion. The actual 20% casualty rate, while tragic, was better than feared. Private John Agnew lands in a flooded field. He nearly drowns getting his equipment off. He reaches dry ground exhausted and soaked. He has no idea where he is. He walks through the dark, looking for other Americans. He finds 2 other lost paratroopers. The 3 of them huddle in a hedgerow until dawn. At first light, they see a German patrol. 5 Germans, walking along a road, not particularly alert. Agnew and his 2 companions open fire. They kill 3 Germans, the other 2 flee. Agnew's team takes the Germans' weapons and keeps moving. They're still lost, but now they're armed better. Throughout the day, Agnew's team grows. They encounter other lost paratroopers. By late afternoon, they have about 20 men. They still don't know exactly where they are, but they keep moving, generally east, figuring they'll either reach friendly lines or find something worth attacking. At dusk, they stumble onto a German artillery position. 20 paratroopers assault 6 artillery pieces and their crews. The Americans win, destroying the guns. They've accomplished nothing that was in the original plan, but they've disrupted German artillery support for the beaches. By June 7th, the American airborne forces are finally consolidating. Units are finding each other. Command structures are being re-established. The chaos is resolving into organized positions, but it's taken 24 hours longer than planned. The scattered drop means the Americans control less territory than they were supposed to. Some objectives weren't taken. Some bridges weren't secured. Some crossroads remain in German hands. On paper, the airborne operation achieved maybe 60% of its objectives, but that 60% was enough. The confusion, created by the scattered drop, delayed German response more than a perfect drop would have. The Germans spent the first 24 hours of the invasion fighting scattered paratroopers everywhere instead of concentrating forces against the beaches. General Omar Bradley, commanding U.S. Ground Forces, later wrote, "The airborne operation was a tactical failure, but a strategic success. We lost too many men in the scattered drop. We failed to take many objectives, but the confusion we created in the German rear was worth more than perfect execution of the plan would have been." 75 years after D-Day, historians have access to German documents, American after-action reports, and interviews with survivors. The full picture of what happened that night is finally clear, and the conclusion is surprising. The navigation error that scattered the paratroopers wasn't really an error at all. It was the inevitable result of attempting something incredibly difficult under terrible conditions. And it worked better than perfection would have. After the war, captured German officers were extensively interviewed. Their assessments of the airborne assault are remarkably consistent. General Günther Blumentritt, Chief of Staff to the German Commander-in-Chief West, said, "The airborne landings created complete chaos in our rear areas. We never regained control of the situation. By the time we understood what was happening, it was too late to mount an effective response." Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, overall German commander in the West, was even more blunt. "The scattered parachute drops confused us more than any other aspect of the invasion. We couldn't determine the enemy's main effort. Every decision we made was based on incomplete and contradictory information. The German assessment identifies the key factor: uncertainty. The scattered drop created uncertainty about American intentions, strength, and objectives. This uncertainty paralyzed German decision-making during the critical hours when quick decisions might have stopped the invasion. Among American commanders, there was debate about whether the airborne operation succeeded or failed. Some pointed to the high casualties and failed objectives as proof it was badly executed. Others argued the strategic success justified the tactical failures. General Matthew Ridgway, commanding the 82nd Airborne, defended his men. They were scattered by forces beyond their control, but they fought with incredible courage and initiative. Every man did his duty, often under impossible circumstances. The operation succeeded because of their determination, not despite the scattering. General Maxwell Taylor, commanding the 101st Airborne, took a different view. The scattering was a failure of planning and execution. We were lucky it worked out. We should learn from this and do better next time. Taylor pushed for better training and equipment to prevent future scattered drops. Both were right. The operation succeeded despite serious execution problems, and it could have been done better. But it's also possible that doing it better would have produced worse results. Sometimes imperfection has advantages that perfection lacks. From a strategic perspective, the airborne assault achieved its purpose. It secured the flanks of Utah Beach and prevented German reinforcements from counterattacking effectively. The beach landings succeeded in part because German forces were tied down fighting scattered paratroopers inland. But there's a deeper strategic impact. The D-Day airborne assault proved that large-scale airborne operations were feasible. Before D-Day, many military planners questioned whether dropping thousands of paratroopers behind enemy lines could work. After D-Day, despite all the problems, the answer was clear: yes, it can work. This opened up new strategic options. Airborne forces could be used to seize key terrain, create diversions, disrupt enemy rear areas. The entire concept of vertical envelopment, attacking from above rather than along the ground, became a standard tool of modern warfare. What about the individual soldiers whose stories we've followed? Private John Steele, hanging from the church steeple, survived. He played dead for 2 hours before the Germans cut him down and captured him. He later escaped and rejoined American forces. He lived until 1969, always known as the paratrooper who hung from the church. Lieutenant John Dolan, who bluffed the Germans into abandoning Lafayette Bridge, survived the war. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions. He later said, "I was terrified the whole time. I just kept thinking, if I don't do something, we're all going to die. So I did something." Sergeant Charles de Glopper, who died defending the power plant, received the Medal of Honor. His citation reads, "He provided covering fire, allowing his comrades to withdraw, exposing himself to enemy fire with full knowledge that his actions would result in his death. He gave his life to save 5 men. Those 5 men survived the war and told de Glopper's story." Today, if you visit Normandy, you can see memorials to the airborne assault at Sainte-Mère-Église, at Lafayette Bridge, at Utah Beach, and scattered throughout the countryside. These memorials honor both the successful and the lost. They recognize that success came at a cost. There's a special memorial for the men who drowned in the flooded areas. Nobody knows exactly how many died this way. Some estimates are as high as 500. They drowned, weighted down by equipment, tangled in parachutes, in water that was only 5 or 6 feet deep. They survived the jump only to die in a French swamp. Their bodies were recovered over the following weeks and buried with honors. So what's the final verdict on the scattered drop? Was it a failure or a success? The answer is both, and neither. It was a military operation that went badly wrong but achieved its objectives anyway. It cost lives but saved others. It violated military doctrine but proved effective. The lesson isn't that scattering forces is a good tactic. The lesson is that in warfare, unpredictability can be more valuable than perfection. The Germans expected the Americans to land in organized drop zones. When they didn't, German planning fell apart. Chaos defeated order because order couldn't adapt to chaos. There's also a lesson about leadership and training. The scattered drop succeeded because American paratroopers were trained to think independently and take initiative. When plans fell apart, they improvised. German soldiers, trained to follow orders and stick to plans, struggled to adapt. Culture matters in warfare as much as weapons. The D-Day airborne assault influenced military thinking for generations. It demonstrated that chaos could be a weapon, that junior leaders needed authority to make decisions, that rigid plans were vulnerable to unexpected events. Modern military doctrine reflects these lessons. It also showed the value of elite, well-trained units. The paratroopers who jumped into Normandy weren't special because of equipment or weapons. They were special because of training, mindset, and determination. They could accomplish missions under terrible conditions because they'd been prepared for terrible conditions. On the night of June 5th into 6th, 1944, 13,000 American paratroopers jumped into chaos. Most landed in the wrong places. Many died in the first hours. The operation looked like a disaster. German commanders thought they were winning. But by the time the sun set on June 6th, the Allies had established an unshakable foothold in France. The beaches were secure. The airborne forces were consolidating. The Germans were in retreat. The invasion that was supposed to be impossible had succeeded. The navigation error that scattered the paratroopers across 50 square miles of Normandy created the confusion that paralyzed German response. The disaster became a victory because of the courage and initiative of individual soldiers who refused to give up even when everything went wrong. Sometimes the best plan is the one that survives first contact with reality. Sometimes victory comes not from perfect execution but from determined improvisation. Sometimes being scattered and confused is exactly what you need to confuse the enemy even more. The men who jumped into Normandy that night didn't know they were making history. They just knew they had a job to do. They did it, under the worst possible circumstances, and they won. That's the real story of D-Day.